Hi, everyone. This is Sharna. I've spent the beginning of the year in a resting phase with the podcast, letting the new season slowly take shape in my mind. New episodes are coming soon in early March, and I'm hoping this little preview will give you a sense of how I'm thinking about season 3 as a collection of conversations. My book, Lead and Follow, is 3 years old this month. And that's been a good cue for me to reflect on what I've learned in the last few years from how others are using this material in their own work. And it's also prompted me to ask myself, what's next? What's the most relevant and useful thing I could be talking about right now on this topic of leading and following? And where I landed with that question is somewhat beyond the workplace, at least for most of us. And it's also somewhat beyond the classroom. I realized that what I really want to learn more about this year is how to recognize leading and following dynamics when the stakes get a bit bigger. I want to understand better what the consequences of especially our followership actions might be in the midst of somewhat uncomfortable, maybe hard to wrap your arms around challenges like ethical business practice, social good, politics, romance, art, ecology, and more. In many ways, this is a natural next step from much of the research and the stories contained in the first 2 seasons. So I'm really excited to introduce you to this next series of guests who are thinking deeply and expansively about how followers influence their leaders and how follower action or inaction impacts our shared life together on this planet in ways that are maybe at first a little hard to see and almost certainly hard to predict or control. For me, one pretty central idea about this way of looking out at the world is that power isn't exclusively located in either the leading or the following, but rather it's the way in which those two roles interact and influence one another that creates power. So everything that happens to us really flows out of that relationship somehow. And my observation so far is that whatever the scale, whatever the context, when we fail to perform either or both of those roles well, when we refuse or neglect to perform them at all, or even when the balance is a bit off, things tend to become more erratic, more dangerous even, and certainly a lot less enjoyable. I know this may be starting to sound a bit abstract, so I'd like to share an example of how I've been looking at current events for indications of followership and significant leader-follower dynamics on a bigger stage. A few weeks ago, on February 16th, New York Times writer and host Ezra Klein caught a lot of people's attention, including mine, with an episode of the Ezra Klein show called, quote, "Democrats have a better option than Biden." Now, often journalists critique, praise, or otherwise point our attention to leaders and to the action or inaction of leadership. But in this episode, I think Klein is talking about followership and about the relationship between leading and following. Now, to be clear, he himself does not use those terms, but I say he's talking about followership on at least 3 different levels. I'll link the episode in the show notes so you can listen for yourself, but briefly, it makes a pretty bold argument for President Biden not to run for re-election, but rather to make way for an open Democratic convention this summer to choose new National Party candidates. Whether you think this is a wonderful or a terrible idea, it's nevertheless an incredible suggestion for one of the most powerful leaders in the world to follow, which is not something we see every day. Just imagine how a choice like this might alter the future. That's a powerful act of followership. On another level, Ezra Klein urges the current leaders of the Democratic Party to pay attention to and to account for the overwhelming public anxiety that we're seeing about Biden's age. Whether these leaders were to respond with the open convention, as suggested, or in some other way, The public is for sure the largest group of followers possible, and the message is clear. Listen to them, take their concerns seriously, respond in a meaningful way. So again, I see this as a strong call for official leaders to step up their following. And third, Klein specifically addresses Biden's own inner circle of followers. He says, quote, "The people Biden listens to, they need to get him to see this." The inner circle, of course, is made up of people whom we would probably label political leaders themselves. But the call here for them is not to lead more, but to follow more, or at least to take their followership role a lot more seriously. Because in relation to the president, they are followers, they're not leaders. And in that followership role, they have the opportunity to exert a certain type of influence. I find it fascinating that this piece of discourse has emerged at this moment and on such a highly visible platform. At all three levels, we can imagine how consequential it might be for the leader or leaders that Ezra Klein is addressing to actually embrace a followership role. And that opportunity to imagine a different way, an alternative future, that has tremendous value in and of itself. Because in my mind, all change ultimately begins with imagination. It's the reason I advocate for creative practice so strongly in my coaching work. Writing, drawing, singing, dancing, storytelling, any activity that activates your imagination is a powerful tool for ultimately changing your own life and the world around you. Because as silly as it sounds, if you can imagine flying toasters or talking magical trees, you can also imagine a way to feed everyone in your neighborhood. Or you can imagine a way to restore an ecosystem, or anything else that you care about. Imagination is a muscle, and we need to practice it and enjoy using it. So, season 3 is coming soon. If you missed any episodes in season 2, now is a great time to catch up. There are so many gems in there. In the coming months, I invite you to continue thinking with me about leading and following and power on a larger scale, and to learn with me from my new guests about how they see the issues they care about through this lens. As always, if you have comments or suggestions for the podcast, or if you're looking for coaching support around leadership, followership, or collaboration, please send me a personal note. You can reach me at sharna@sharnafabiano.com.